this video, we're going to be making a massive desert castle. So we're here in my survival single player world, and we are going to be filling up the scaffold that I've placed down here, and making a pretty massive desert castle. I want this building to be the biggest building in the area, the dominating force. We've got some smaller buildings over here. I've got a playlist of me making all of those buildings. If you'd like to see it, I'll link it up in the cards. So this sketch we're going to be basing the design off. It's just something that I whipped up the other day. It's very dome-like, and I'm realizing I haven't actually prepared all of the materials. So once we get to the roofs, we will need to do some more resource gathering. But for the moment, we've got oak wood, we've got birch wood, we've got sandstone, and we've got a little bit of spruce wood. And this is going to be the gradient. It is quite subtle, but I think that that's okay. I'm not looking for something that is going to have like quite a stark contrast between the top and the bottom, because we do have this mesa backdrop here, which I think that it will stand out really well against. So what I do when I block out castles is this is a two-tiered castle, so I started with the tower that's going to go all the way to the top, and I made that a decent size, and then I stepped the next tier out from that, and that's going to be the lower one. That's going to be the one that's not going to go up super far, but it's going to be mostly like the base of it. And then from there we can add in more towers around it and see where it takes us. I think what I'm going to do first is I'm going to actually change this, but what I want to do first is just make a flat foundation for this. So grabbing some of my sandstone, because this isn't a desert and you do want like a nice foundation for it, I think that I will go get myself a shovel, and then we can make a nice flat foundation for this, just following this massive round shape and keeping it on like this Y level, so it'll come out from here. And then that'll give us a nice flat foundation to work with that we can connect up with roads, and it'll just be a lot nicer to work on a foundation rather than just come up straight from the ground. So now what we have here is a base. It is quite tall on this side, but I will add in some sort of a staircase or something just to sort of connect it up to the road. I've moved up this major tower in the center here, and what we're going to do now is just create some smaller towers in the center of each curve, I suppose. And I think that the center will be either here, like one block diagonally out, or one more, maybe even one more. So just something small like that, and I'll do that on all 4 corners. And I'm just going to build it up with this sort of a gradient until I reach a height that I think is appropriate. So when I'm building in gradients, I like to assign like a certain number of blocks for each sort of section. So I'm thinking it'll be 6 blocks for each color uninterrupted. So I'll do 6 blocks high of stripped oak logs, and then I'll have maybe 4 to 6 blocks of sort of overlap between that and the next block, and then so on and so forth until I reach the top. And I'll do that on the major tower and the other towers, starting from the lowest Y level that it reaches, because then there is a sort of the gap between the start of each gradient, and it just makes it look like it's not defined by Y level but defined by the bottom of each tower. So we will see how that goes, but I think I'm gonna make this tower pretty tall. What I've also begun doing is oxidizing copper and collecting beeswax so that we can use the weathered and oxidized copper as this sort of like dome material for the top of the castle over there, which I think will contrast really nicely with the warm colors of the mesa background and also the warm colors here, and it will just make it pop a little bit more. So I'm going to build this up and keep oxidizing that copper. So what I've done is I've built up 6 blocks, and then at that point I've started adding in some birch logs, and I've sort of just made it go up in spikes from the 7th block upwards for another up to 4 blocks. And what that does is sort of like integrate the bottom block and the top block, but I think that sort of spikes instead of like doing just a bit of texturing in this area is really beneficial for this build, because the blocks are sort of aligned upwards. So if you notice the logs are facing upwards, so it draws your eye upwards, and it's a bit like, I feel like it's a bit weird to texture with that sort of a block. So spikes it is. This is the sort of style we're going for, and then the rest of this I will just texture in with birch logs. After building this tower up, the major tower and the 4 towers surrounding it, we're at the point where we want to sort of create like a little, I'd like to say like a crown, a little bit of overhang onto the top of the towers, so that we can build up even more for some of the towers. Maybe 2 of them we can build up a smaller tower on top, and these ones maybe leave them, but just sort of like a little I don't know what it's called, but something just a little bit like this. I think that the style we will end up going for is actually on this side. I did a bit of trial and error, and I think that something like this design would work really well. This design not so much. I feel like it's much more minimalistic, and I think that this side, as you can see the 2 prongs on the outer side, it just makes it look a little bit more supported. Here not so much. And I also like that there are staggered heights, so this is like a low sort of tower, this is a bit higher, and then on the other side here we have quite a high tower, and then this one will be a little bit lower than this tower, I think. And I think that staggered effect will really add just some like a bit of ruggedness, a bit of non-uniformity to the build, which I think is really nice. And I think that this looks much better than this, just because I don't like how you can see the wood all the way up to like that level. I think that that's a bit much. But first we're going to add some rimming to the top of this major tower. What I'm going to do is just go around on the bottom of the half slab, putting in half slabs of dark oak planks. And then above this, what I'm going to do is put trapdoors around. And then we can make a dome on top of here. I might look up a template just so it doesn't look a bit out of proportion or anything. Or I might make it with dirt or stone first so I can easily remove it. But yeah, that's the next major task, and that will top off this building. We might add some pretty big circular windows into the sides, but other than that, that should be about it for the detailing of this. I think it's quite a large scale build, so I can't be bothered adding in details, let's be real. But I think that everything will need to be to scale, so just some big windows I think will do it justice. So I'll just go around with the trapdoors on top of this, and this is like, I think this is a really nice sort of trimming. I think that it's like a nice like sort of divider between colors, and I think it will look very good. And when I've got enough copper to create the top of this, we will create a dome, but for the moment I'm just going to continue creating the little overhangs for this part of the build. The method I use to make domes is quite simple really. I will build into the center of the circle, and then I'll build up the same amount that I built in. So there's 7 blocks along here, so I built 7 blocks up, and then I make like just like half a circle here, making sure that it's symmetrical from like that angle, just so it doesn't look like too tall or too short, and it's all well in proportion. And then what I'm going to do now is I'm going to replace all of this with the block that I'm going to use, which in this case it's going to be mostly waxed weathered copper, and then for some highlights later we can add in just regular oxidized copper, and then I'll just connect it up through trial and error. So now that we've got this sort of framework going, I will build up the sides here and start sort of making shapes, making it look more dome-like, making sure that I keep it very symmetrical on both sides. And then once I get about a third of the way, halfway up, I'll start going to the very top and sort of creating a shape for that. And then it ends up looking quite dome-like, just trial and error, seeing what makes it look not too convex but not too concave. And now what I'll do is I will copy this over on the other sides, light it up underneath so I don't make an unintentional mob farm, and then we'll see what it looks like. So we've just finished up the build here. I added in some windows, as you can see. I just really wanted some like big circular centerpiece, and I didn't add any glass in between them, because then when I get an elytra at one point, I can just fly in and out of that room right at the top there, and I think that it will be very convenient while also like looking like a window. So that's vaguely just a circular shape. And then we've got a little entranceway down here, and at the top we created a dome shape on all of these. I'm not too sold on this one. I think it needs to be maybe like 1 block higher, but that's an issue for another day. This one I think looks good, and I also, if you can see there, added in some fully oxidized copper and some stripped warped stems to add a little bit of like depth, texture, but also like highlight. So like if you imagine that the sun is here, or like over here, and it's hitting that part, then that part's gonna be shiny. So that's what I was going for there. So I think that's gonna be it for this build. It's been a big one. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, let me know down in the comments, leave a like and subscribe so you don't miss the next video.